Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to today's tropical weather outlook for July 18th, 2026. Today, we're going to talk about our disturbance in the Gulf, which has been designated Invest 91L, as chances for potential tropical development continue to increase for this weekend. We're going to take a look at the latest models, especially models that are specifically for 91L, like the SHIPS data. And of course, we're going to take a look at how conditions currently are, including how the system itself is currently doing to better help catch you up to date, let's say, on what is happening in the tropics. And certainly quite a bit is happening today. So with that being said, let's get started by taking a look at the National Hurricane Center tropical weather bulletin right now, last updated as of around 2 o'clock Eastern time. So we have the 2 p.m. bulletin and Invest 91L here in the Gulf, designated today, now up to a 40% chance of development. So we are now in the orange moderate category for potential development here in the Gulf. And the National Hurricane Center explicitly says in its tropical weather bulletin text that gradual development is possible, and we could see a tropical depression over the next few days here in the Gulf. So the National Hurricane Center is now beginning to mention the chances of tropical development here, and that certainly puts everyone along the Gulf Coast from anywhere from northwestern Florida potentially to as far west as Louisiana on watch here for maybe some tropical impacts over the next few days. I'll show you what the models show in a little bit, but that generally seems to be the area in which those need to watch for potential impacts or at least where the greatest risks of impacts or maybe a landfall, if we do get a system that develops, will likely be. Really quickly, though, before we spend the rest of the video talking about 91L, I do want to obviously touch on what is happening in the Pacific, because obviously things continue to ramp up in the Pacific, and they will continue to do so over the next few weeks, as I've been talking about for a long time. But we have Tropical Storm Melita here, which is 70-mile-per-hour winds, 990 millibars with its pressure, and it looks like it is probably going to get as strong as it is right now, not looking like it'll become a hurricane anymore. I mean, it fell just short of becoming a hurricane, but it is more than likely going to start weakening from now on as conditions become less favorable. And conditions with Alita have surprisingly been not as favorable as I thought. I mean, I thought that this was definitely going to become a hurricane, maybe even become a major, but it looks like we're only settling with a strong tropical storm for now. But there are two other areas here in the Eastern Pacific, and more than likely, at least one of these areas will probably become a hurricane in the next week or so, including Invest 97E. This is at a 90% chance of development, and then we have another 30% chance of development in the next 7 days beyond that. So lots of ample opportunity for development here in the Pacific, and we are likely beginning to turn on that named storm train here, which is just going to take off and probably persist for the next few weeks going into the future and probably beyond that, as the very active part of the hurricane season here in the Pacific is likely just taking off. But moving on back to the Atlantic here, since we have our Invest 91L in the Gulf, and we're mainly focusing on 91L since it is in the Gulf and it will likely bring impacts to land here. But taking a look at the satellite shot right now, not a very well-organized system just yet. There's still lots of dry air kind of impeding on this storm being able to really take off right now. And more than likely, if we do get something out of this Invest, it'll probably be a weak to moderate, maybe moderate to high-end tropical storm at the very most. But regardless, it will bring impacts to the Gulf Coast here, rain being one of them, and that's something that we've seen quite a bit throughout Florida for the last few days, and still seeing rainfall today across Florida, as you can see with convective activity bubbling along the peninsula right now, including as well here along the Panhandle, and that's probably going to spread throughout the entire northern Gulf Coast, and especially if we do get development and when we do get a landfall here along the northern Gulf Coast, we will definitely see rainfall impacts from that. But the system itself is disorganized right now, but you can clearly see that there is some sort of circulation here on satellite, so there is some sort of structure to this. And taking a look at the radar here, off the coast of Florida. You could also see the reflection of the circulation right now. Again, very, very broad, but there is a very interesting part here just to the west of Tampa, and this has definitely gotten a lot of attention on Twitter earlier, and it appears to be in a very aggressive mid-level vortex that kind of almost looked like it had an eye for a brief period of time here as it was kind of moving on off to the west. But, obviously we do not have an eye at all associated with this storm just yet, or probably will never really get that, organized. But still an interesting feature nonetheless. But this storm is developing, and taking a look at the actual vorticity associated with the storm as a whole, I mean, you could see it definitely does have a decent vorticity signature associated with it. And it does kind of have a round shape to it too, so there is probably some sort of low-level circulation present with 91L, but obviously it still has more consolidating to do, and as that happens, we're going to see more of these vorticity values begin to increase on the scale here. But for now, things are still kind of broad and not fully organized just yet. But I do think we will see organization of the storm, and probably one of the biggest factors that will help aid in development is the sea surface temperatures, which are going to be and are currently very, very warm across the northern Gulf right now, and that's something that I've always said will help aid in development here. Sea surface temperature anomalies right now, according to the NOAA Coral Reef Watch, are at least a degree Celsius above normal in the Gulf here, so that is very, very warm, especially considering that, usually the Gulf is always very warm for development, even if things are near normal. I mean, the near normal baseline is still very warm here in the Gulf, and we even have some pockets here that get even further than just a degree Celsius above normal. And how that's reflected in the actual sea surface temperatures here, well, they are, again, very warm. Lots of 30 degrees Celsius readings, as well as 29, and even some pockets of 31 near the coast here, and especially near the shelf water of the northern Gulf Coast. So very, very warm and toasty sea surface temperatures. That'll definitely help aid in deep convection, which should help consolidate and close off whatever low-level circulation is there associated with 91L, and I definitely think that these sea surface temperatures will come in handy for development of this system. And once again, those along the Gulf Coast are going to have to watch closely for development this weekend. But regardless of whether or not we do get development, these sea surface temperatures as well will definitely help aid in terms of creating a lot of moisture for rainfall here along the Gulf Coast, especially for Florida as well. And that is a threat that will happen, and an impact that we will see regardless of development. And I definitely don't want to diminish that, because, as I said before, rainfall always tends to be the number one impact, and the impact that people kind of get caught off guard by the most. So you definitely do not want to leave that out. All right, so moving on to the models now, and since we are now talking about an invest here, thought I'd take out the SHIPS data, which is a model, statistical model data specifically run for invests when they are designated. And this kind of takes a look at all of the environmental factors, and also gives its own prediction for, forecast intensity and things like that, and also rapid intensification probabilities as well, which is probably the biggest thing you see the SHIPS data used for online, or at least when people mention it online. And luckily for 91L right now, there isn't any strong rapid intensification probability here. And you may be wondering why that might be the case, since, sea surface temperatures here are very warm in the northern Gulf, but environmental conditions are going to be favorable enough for development, but they're obviously not going to be the most optimal for intensification. But the SHIPS is still forecasting a tropical storm here, seemingly. Taking a look at its wind intensity forecast, they do bring this up to 45 knots here, as you can see by the blue line, the forecasted winds in knots. So that is a moderate tropical storm, 50 miles per hour. Definitely not nothing, but obviously kind of highlights that we are not looking at a particularly strong storm here. But in order to get impacts, we don't need a strong storm. All we need, again, is some gusty winds, and more than likely, probably the biggest impact from this will be the rainfall. But the ships does seem to indicate potential development of 91L nonetheless. So that's one model indicating potential development from this storm. What about the other the models, the operational models? Taking a look at the GFS today, and very interestingly enough, as you can see here with the GFS, it seemingly shows development too. And it obviously shows, again, more than likely a weak system and a small system here that develops a small, closed, low-level center here, and it eventually moves inland by the time we get to Monday or Tuesday, roughly around the northwestern Florida panhandle. But this is definitely the look of a weak tropical storm, or maybe tropical depression in the very least here, that the GFS shows. And I find this interesting because the GFS has been the most bearish model up until now in terms of showing development here in the Gulf. So the fact that we have the GFS today on board with potential development chances is definitely very interesting to me. And then the European AI model, on the other hand, you could see definitely shows development occurring here. And it probably has a moderate and tropical storm in the very least that develops. And interestingly enough here, the European AI, unlike the GFS, actually makes this go on a more westerly trajectory, and that probably takes us into Louisiana rather than the GFS, which brings us northwestward straight into the western Florida panhandle. So a little bit of uncertainty in terms of where this system might go on the models, and we've been dealing with uncertainty from the models here for the past few days, and looks like that continues. So as I've said before, anywhere from northwestern Florida, even from the northwestern Florida peninsula, all up along the panhandle to probably stretching as far west as Louisiana, are going to have to keep a close eye out on whatever 91L does here, because it looks like that's where all the possibilities are for potential development and a potential track right now. So I'd in general say, regardless of what exactly this is going to do, the entire northern Gulf Coast should be watching for progress here of how 91L develops. And again, going to the rainfall too, that is definitely going to be something that we see all up along the Gulf Coast here. And let's actually, bring the GFS. The GFS probably represents the rainfall totals better. You could see here, again, stretching anywhere from Louisiana to western Florida here, rainfall is predicted, regardless of the fact of where this develops, because the GFS brings this onshore here in northwestern Florida, yet we still see precipitation and rainfall stretching as far west as Louisiana. So as I said before, rainfall will be an impact regardless, but since there is a actual tropical threat to be watching here, obviously keep your eye out on the tropics, and obviously we will be continuing to do so throughout the weekend here, and we'll be monitoring Invest 91L. I'll continue to have updates on YouTube, monitoring the progress, and obviously covering the new National Hurricane Center updates, and of course covering the latest on all the models. And obviously I'm also on Twitter too, and also on posting on Twitter much more often than I would on YouTube, because YouTube I do 1 or 2 videos a day, but on Twitter I'm able to post updates down to the minute for whenever we get new model run updates or new satellite imagery or new data of some sort. So if you want to follow me somewhere else as well to get more consistent updates throughout the day, Twitter is definitely the place to do it, and I definitely will be active on there as things continue to get interesting here in the Gulf with Invest 91L. But that's going to do it for this afternoon's update. Hope you enjoyed what you saw today. If you did, I would really appreciate if you like this video, comment, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel, and make sure to turn notifications on to get videos the second I upload them. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. I'll talk to you guys again tomorrow.